I'll be so honest, there was a tiny part of me that did consider shaving my eyebrows off for this video, but then I was like, you know what, that's a little bit too big of a commitment, better not. I don't have the naturally eyebrowless look of Sarah Hawkinson. These little caterpillars are here to stay. What terrified me most really was just the thought of how they would look growing back, so I don't know, maybe I'll try it someday. Anyway, hi, I am the Antichrist. My name is Kylie. I go by Haunted Hippie on this channel, and this is my online virtual cult. All you have to do to sign up is just click subscribe, also click the notification bell and the like button, that way you never miss the next video. Was I put on this earth to signal the apocalypse? Yes, absolutely, but I'm also here to talk about horror movies with you guys. And today, obviously, we have to talk about MaXXXine, but this is not solely going to be a MaXXXine review. I believe that this trilogy needs to be looked at as a whole because now it is complete. I also have recently gone back and I did some watch-alongs on my channel. We live stream sometimes and you guys watch movies with me. I rewatched both X and Pearl, and I do have some serious reevaluations for at least one of those movies. So I want to talk about that first and then also loop that into my feelings about MaXXXine because everything does tie together. Also, I really thought that I would be able to wear my vintage 80s Levi's jacket today, but it is too hot. If you've been around, you know that I live in the hottest room in my house. I rent a room from someone that rarely believes in air conditioning, even though it's been in the mid-90s in Los Angeles. Yay, so fun. Miraculously, the air conditioning has been on the past few days. It's still too hot. What are you gonna do? Let's get into my reevaluation of X because oh my god. X is a national treasure. It is a perfect film. You know, the first time that I watched it, I didn't really like it that much. I gave it 3 stars and I didn't even give it a heart. Believe me, there is a world of difference between a 3-star movie that you do give a heart versus one that you don't. A lot of 3-star movies have upheld this industry. They kind of keep the world turning. Some 3-star movies, they're just not meant to be viewed again. I don't know. Best current example is I think that the new Twisters is probably going to be that 3-star movie that carries us through Q3 of the year. I say us as if I invested in that movie. Anyway, I don't really know what changed in my life that made me view X so much differently. The only thing that I can think of that definitely colored my perception of some of the relationships in this movie was the fact that I fell in love myself since X came out. It's gushy and stupid, I know. It's true, he's fine as hell. He paid for my plane ticket to Costa Rica. He spoils me. And my perspective of the relationship of Howard and Pearl changed drastically upon this last viewing. And it's really because I'm pretty sure I've found the person that I would consider it a privilege to grow that old and crusty with. Like, you don't understand how much of an honor it would be to get to grow that old with him. The first time that I watched the movie, I was 22 years old when X came out. Now I've recently turned 25. That's what I was busy doing in Costa Rica. So yes, I was young, you know, young and inexperienced. I thought the framing of the old people in the movie was meant to utilize them as a horror element because they were the ones killing people. So I thought that the love scenes between them were meant to be like, gross, old people, ew. But then this last time that I watched it, I was like, no, like this is really beautiful. It doesn't become a horror scene until we pan down and we see that MaXXXine is trapped under the bed with them. In which case, yeah, that's horror. I don't actually want to be in the room to witness that. That's horrifying. But before that, there's like these declarations of love and he's telling her how beautiful he still thinks that she is. And he's even willing to risk a heart attack just to get laid with her, you know? I think that is so beautiful. So either I used to just lack the critical understanding of the framing of the film, or my own life experiences have just colored my perspective and I can choose to frame it that way. I also think that I was more empathetic to the perspective of Howard and Pearl, people who grew up in a different time, and the way that male fragility is explored with Howard versus the jealousy of Pearl and how Pearl and MaXXXine mirror one another. The dichotomy between them is fully explored in X. It's partially why I still kind of lack an understanding of Pearl and why that movie exists as it is. There's so much envy with Pearl, and a lot of that is not her fault. There is the kind of internalized misogyny of her being so jealous and so resentful because with Pearl looking the way she does, it's too late for her. She missed her opportunity in her youth, which we do then get to see in Pearl, that MaXXXine still has. There still is a chance for MaXXXine. This time around, I really had to unpack my first viewing experience, and I realized that I had some views that I really disagree with now. I feel like X really holds a mirror up to you and it's like, oh, what? So do you think that Pearl is ugly? Do you think it's gross that old people still love each other and have sex? Because they show us the sex scenes from the porno that they're making and like, that's all fun. That's all gorgeous. And then we see Howard and Pearl and it's like, well, how do you, the viewer, see that? You were just enjoying a very similar scene not a moment ago when that was all fake. That was all acting. Now you're witnessing real decades-long love and and you find that disgusting, do you? That totally could not be the intention of the film, but you know, art is art. It'll make you think about whatever it does. So even if Ty West was trying to use those old people as a horror element, the fact that you can still read what I did the second time around, I think is pretty cool. Also, the commentary on sex work. I'm pretty sure that I'm on board with what Ty West was trying to do there. And yes, it is very, very spoon-feedy because Jenna Ortega's character is going through this wonderful arc, might I say. We'll get back into that. And with Brittany Snow and Mia Goth, listen, I was in the mood to agree with the pretty ladies on my TV that were advocating for sex work. Bobby Lynn and MaXXXine really shift Lorraine's perspective, Jenna Ortega's character. I like how it is a depiction of seeing proud sexual women inspire another young woman. I love that it inspires her to take agency over her own body. Her relationship with her boyfriend too, the camera guy, he has all these philosophies and he's saying that it's just art, and he's speaking with the cowboy, what's his name? Wayne. And Martin Henderson, I love you, by the way. RJ's talking with Wayne about how he's gonna revolutionize the porn industry because he's shooting it like it's actual art, like it's actual film. I'm so annoyed that I neglected to mention here that he also says that no, Lorraine is one of the good girls. She's a good girl. And Wayne is like, I hate to tell you, brother, there are no good girls. Women are sexual beings. Oh, surprise. Oh. And then ironically, when he opposes his own girlfriend participating in the film, she's able to just kind of like throw all of his own philosophies back in his face. So we had a couple of choices, and I think, you know, the dialogue with him and Wayne, it says it better than I could. But it was like, yeah, well, you can either accept your own philosophies and go through with this, or you can expose the fact that you are a hypocrite and a lot of those philosophies only apply to you as a man. I guess both things ended up happening though, didn't they? I loved it. Upon this viewing, I found the exploration of particularly white male fragility to just be sensational. My first watch, I didn't think that they were doing enough because I just found the twist of Pearl being the killer kind of uninspired. I was like, oh, well, you're trying to reference Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It'd be fun to kind of flip the script on this story. Like, why are we still having the weird Hicks be the killers rather than switching it up? Like, I used to think that the cameraman should have snapped because of what happened with his girlfriend and that we should have explored the male fragility that way. Now I'm like, I love it. And honestly, his death scene when Pearl kills him, it's kind of one of the best scenes ever put to film, but I do enjoy that it really is about the girlies. This is about the dichotomy of MaXXXine and Pearl. The one that becomes self-destructive when she doesn't get what she wants, the one who is a huge dreamer and creative, whatever, versus MaXXXine, who is very tactical. She has a plan. She wants it just as bad as Pearl, but she is actually going to take the action to do it. Less a dreamer and more someone that just really has their eye on the prize. That being said, that is why the existence of Pearl as a movie is still a little bit confusing to me. I think it's amazing that this is a trilogy. I think it had so much potential to be a great exploration. That said, potential is there. The execution is not. Unfortunately, my opinion about Pearl remains exactly the same. The first time that I watched it, didn't give it a heart, but I gave it 3.5 stars. So I used to think that Pearl was better than X. I was like, you know, it's very colorful, it's gorgeous, a beautifully made film, and it's also this really interesting kind of meditative character study. But people act like Pearl is what X was. Like it's this rich character study, but honestly, did you learn anything about Pearl in Pearl that you didn't already know from X? X already established that she was a failed performer and that she was resentful of her situation. What do we see in Pearl? That she became a failed showgirl who was resentful of her situation. We saw nothing else, and they cut off a immediately when Howard gets home, when it would have been such an interesting exploration of their relationship to see how they got to the dynamic they were at in X. Why didn't we get more about Howard? Like, I guess maybe it's implied that because he went to war, now he is kind of cut from the same cloth as Pearl. He has also killed, and so they just find solace in one another with what they've done. But that's still a pretty big question, and if that was meant to be the implication, I don't think that it was strong enough, because their unconditional love in X, I think, is really interesting. It's not really that common that you get to see old people depicted in movies where they're still that in love with one another. And I think that that's something that a lot of people crave. Like, I think that was a bigger theme of the movie than even maybe Ty West intended, because it is really interesting how Pearl wanted to be loved by the whole world, but she got the whole world of love from this one person, from Howard. Pearl doesn't really do anything for me. I do think it is Mia Goth's best performance, because, you know, everybody talks about that monologue, but I know some people don't want to hear it, but that movie is like puddle deep. We come to understand that it's not just this resentment of how she grew up and being bored with farm life, but in her monologue she reveals that she thinks there's something more deeply wrong with her. So what the reveal is that she's got antisocial personality disorder, like she's a psychopath. That's so boring to me, and it doesn't really lend itself at all to where she's at in X. Ty West seemed to want to explore the relationship of Howard and Pearl given what we saw in X, and so it is just baffling to me why Pearl is cut off at its most interesting moment. Why deny us of that in Pearl? I know that it's called Pearl. It's supposed to be the character study of Pearl, but then just don't have Howard in the equation at all. Don't make him come home, because it's like this mic drop moment, and I'm like, well, give me the sequel to Pearl. I don't really care so much what's gonna happen with MaXXXine now. Two people, potentially murderous people with Howard, we don't know his story, that have to reconcile their relationship after all this adversity is so much more interesting to me than girl who wants to be a star and hates her parents. I mean, I give the movie 3.5 stars. Like, there's the interesting component of how society has crafted this life for Pearl and how she has so little agency in her life. That is interesting, and it's an interesting generational difference between her and MaXXXine, though they both came from extremely conservative backgrounds. Pearl's parents just, you know, they're German and they're trying to live a very stable life given where they came from and the state of the world. MaXXXine's father is like a megachurch pastor on TV. Both of them had parents that wanted to maintain total control of each other's lives, and so there is that interesting comparison of the girl that got trapped versus the girl that got out and became successful. So I do give Pearl that credit where it's due. Like, 3.5 that's a good rating from me. I'm so glad that I at least understand X a lot better, or at the very least, like, crafted a better perspective for myself. But Pearl still frustrates me so much. And that now brings us to MaXXXine, and unfortunately, I don't have good news. It ended up being my least favorite movie of the trilogy. MaXXXine works on the levels that I talked about when you're including the entire trilogy and all the themes presented in Pearl, because Pearl kind of is the dark side of the mirror to MaXXXine's story, I guess. Oh look, I'm holding up an X. MaXXXine was also fun. It was heavily stylized. I understand all the people that enjoyed it, because for a lot of people that's like all they need from the movies. In fact, I would say like majority of the people that go to the movie theater, they're going to have fun to be entertained. It's when you get to the more critical side of the audience, a la me, and then like professional critics and a lot of people on Letterboxd and stuff like that, that, you know, there's like two sides and there's almost no middle ground. People think it's a mess. They hate the movie. Even people that loved both X and Pearl, they're like, what the hell happened? And then people that think that it's like the best movie of the year. I do see more negativity than positivity, even though the Letterboxd rating, it seems pretty good. It's at like a 3.3. The point is, like, I understand both sides of the reaction. I just happen to fall more on the negative end myself. I personally was really bored by the film because for me, I just need more substance beyond really cool stylization. Otherwise, I do not feel mentally stimulated. It's different when I'm going into a movie just for dumb fun. Like, I love the Friday the 13th remake. I love the House of Wax remake from 2005. Like, I love so many absolutely shitty early 2000s slashers just because they're fun. I do enjoy also turning my brain off, so that's not the point. When a movie is the conclusion to this kind of groundbreaking trilogy, especially for the horror community and just like film in general, this is one of A24's biggest films of the year. There clearly is an attempt here to wrap up everything that's been presented to us thus far. Like, I've watched some interviews. There's a video of Mia Goth and Ty West, and they're like breaking down from the scene with her when she's getting the mold done. Like, you know that there is an intention to do something with this film. But there's intention and there's execution, and this is a really subjective thing. It's just, this is a movie that didn't connect for me at all. I don't really feel like I got anything out of it. It was kind of similar to Pearl, but even worse in the sense that I kind of felt attached to nothing. Even the character of MaXXXine, who I loved in X, I just again thought that they were puddle deep characters and it was over stylized with no substance. All these characters would just show up and then die. With MaXXXine's best friend, there's just nothing to him. He shows up for a couple of scenes and then he's gone. He was the most that we got out of a secondary character in terms of how MaXXXine has built relationships after the events of X. She has her agent, but that's different because that's not so much a personal relationship. I'm so curious now on her views of love and the people that she lost. There are a couple of scenes where she's experiencing some trauma, and the fact that her past is being brought back to confront her, it colors the whole film. But I don't feel like we ever really get to see what MaXXXine thinks of her own situation. The way that MaXXXine is played by Mia Goth, it seems like she's kind of removed from the situation, and maybe that's intentional. Maybe that was something Mia Goth decided to do to have MaXXXine, shield herself off from the outside world as a way to protect herself. But I felt really frustrated by the performance. I didn't feel like I was getting that much. I also had a little bit more trouble with her accent in this movie than I did with X, which I said that when X came out, I'm saying it again. The accent work is just not my favorite. I'm not even from Texas, so I'm not the person to be speaking on this. Take this with a grain of salt. But when Kevin Bacon walks on the scene, and I'm really sorry to pit two beautiful queens against one another, but Kevin Bacon's accent work is fucking sublime. He is the best thing about MaXXXine, which should not be the case. And I'm not putting this all on Mia Goth because, like I said, some of my frustrations could have been very intentional acting choices. I think that it's also probably the writing because, oh, do you remember her last line of the film? I was like, oh, go girl, give us nothing. The reporter asks, what do you have to say to little girls out there that, want to become big stars? And she's like, well, it's hard work and you have to never give up. Shakespeare couldn't do it. Like, wow. I would expect someone who's gone through everything that she's gone through to maybe have a little bit more insight, maybe have something a little bit deeper to say. The mic drop at the end of that quote of her using her father's saying wasn't that much of a mic drop because we'd heard it 1,000 times before. It's just not profound when it's trying to be. It is a great line of dialogue. It is such a great tagline. It's great for marketing. I love hearing Mia Goth say it, but I think that she only said it 1 or 2 times in X, which made it so much more impactful. It said a lot in MaXXXine, and I don't know, I guess it just kind of lost its bite for me. I really like the idea of kind of reclaiming your horrific past and using it as a springboard to create a better life for yourself. I do think that's cool. I just don't think that the execution of that sentiment was very good at all. And a lot of people agree that the third act was just particularly heinous. I actually kind of disagree with that because, like I said, I was a bit bored by this movie in the first 2 acts, and so when all that weird, crazy, satanic stuff started happening, I just was like, yeah, I mean, okay, this is kind of exciting. But what an ending. Oh god, I don't know if I can get into that yet. Let's maybe talk about some of the 5,000 plot lines that were going on that had no follow through. Why was the Night Stalker such a heavy element of this film, other than to be like a sorry imitation of the plot structure of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? I get that each entry of this franchise is meant to pay homage to a particular decade, and obviously the serial killers really heavily influenced all the slashers of the 1980s because that was one of the fears of society during that time. That's cool, but then why was she in a movie called The Puritan 2? Why wasn't she starring in a slasher? They also bring up, Jamie Lee Curtis, and all these other actors that got their start in horror films. Well, Jamie Lee Curtis, she was in Halloween, she was in a slasher. Obviously it ties more into her father and all his anti-Satan hoo-ha. So then in that case, maybe don't make the Night Stalker such a heavy element of like the background aura of the film, because never once did you or I think that the Night Stalker was the one doing this, right? Like, we all knew that her father was the one coming back into her life, right? Because at the very end of X, there's the big reveal that she is that evangelist's daughter, and then in the very beginning of MaXXXine, there's that home video of her with her father. So I don't know if that was meant to be dramatic irony, like, oh, we the audience know something that MaXXXine doesn't, around in terms of like who's coming after her and stuff. But then in that case, I'm like, why didn't they just show her father's face earlier? It kind of seems like it's supposed to be this like twist reveal. It's way too obvious for that. So then I wonder why they didn't just make it a more straightforward whodunit. If they're paying homage to the 80s, why not make it a little bit more a la the original Friday the 13th? Like, make it a proper whodunit, that way the audience can remain more engaged. Because when you know who the villain is from literally the first scene of the movie in that home video, that's why I was kind of bored. That's why I was kind of checking out, and I just felt like I was kind of waiting around for that third act. This movie's just trying to do too much because there's so much about it that I think is cool. I don't mind that whole tie-in with her father and having to kind of vanquish her past to make it to the top. But then we see so much of the gritty underbelly of 1980s Hollywood, which again I think is really cool, but it's just kind of there. Like I didn't feel like that was really servicing anything besides, you know, well here's this other, you know, one stop of MaXXXine's career. There just were so many random bits thrown in about the entertainment industry, like the cop that wanted to be an actor. Why did that come up multiple times? Who cares? With his dying breath, he mentions that he wanted to be an actor. Like, bro, I would have loved to have seen more of this kind of meta mirror between what's happening in MaXXXine's life and the movie. The Puritan too, like I said, it just doesn't make sense. Why isn't she starring in a slasher? You could still be making a slasher called The Puritan, I don't know. There's just a lot of meandering, I feel like, and the relationship that she's developing with the director, again, it's all this surface level stuff that you and I, we already know. She's like, you know, the beast will spit you out if you take your eyes off the prize for 1 second, and it may not ever get a taste for you again. There's nothing deeper than just Hollywood is hard. There's no intersectionalism explored about the fact that it's a woman director and this actress that are both fighting tooth and nail to be in this industry. It made me more curious about the director character because I'm like, well, how did she make it here as a woman in the 1980s directing this? There were so many cool parallels that they almost explored. One scene that I think was really good was the one I mentioned earlier where she's getting covered in the goop. And in one of the interviews, Mia Goth was talking about how, yeah, when you go into that, you bring whatever's going on in your life because you're forced to just sit there, be still with no stimulation, and you're alone with your thoughts. I thought it was so interesting how that scene mirrored what was going on in MaXXXine's life and how it related to the movie she was starring in. There just was not enough of that for me. And am I really going to get started on the Psycho House? Okay, I have to. Why would you pay for the rights to the Universal lot, the Psycho House, and do absolutely nothing with it? Why is it there? I get that everything about this trilogy is very spoon-feedy, and sometimes I'm okay with that. And in this case, it's about how the world was too prudish to expect an old lady to be a killer. Are we supposed to be like, oh my god, that's just like X, because I didn't expect Pearl to be a killer? But they really went for it with the old lady being the killer, whereas in Psycho, it was a dude dressed as a lady. Wow. Newsflash, X is not the first movie to have an old lady being a killer. Like, was that genuinely the only reason? Because there is a moment where there's a chase scene and MaXXXine, she runs into the house, and I'm like, oh, finally, okay, I've never seen the inside of the Psycho House. Take me there. What's gonna go on? And then Kevin Bacon's character is escorted off the premises before he even makes it into the house. Boo! The only other time they used the Psycho House was when the director was driving MaXXXine around, and I was thinking, wow, this director has a surprising amount of time to spend just talking to MaXXXine and not even like preparing for the role or anything. Like, they're just chatting. Not very realistic, let me just tell you. It just felt weird and out of character to me that someone would need to tell MaXXXine that she shouldn't take her eye off the prize. MaXXXine already couldn't take her eye off the prize if someone shot her with a gun, which someone did, remember? Her whole motive in life is to become a star, which I thought that we would get a little bit more of the reasoning for that in MaXXXine, which we didn't. That's why I say that it's puddle deep, because I just don't understand anything about MaXXXine that I didn't already know. I think we can infer that maybe stardom would be a source of safety, a way for her to find identity after her tumultuous upbringing. But then in that case, wouldn't anonymity be better? I mean, given what happens in MaXXXine, why would she want want to be famous? Why would she want her father to be able to find her and know who she is? She changed her last name from Miller to Minx. Like, why did anything happen? I think my biggest contrast of enjoyment in X versus my lack of enjoyment from MaXXXine was the cast of characters. They had such a dynamite cast for MaXXXine. When it was announced, I was so taken aback. I was like, this is about to be insane. But everyone just kind of shows up in an isolated scene on their own. We don't even get to see the dynamic of all these amazing actors together at any point. They were all so fun and so interesting with something to offer in X. Bobby Lynn breaking down perceptions of acting in porn, giving us this great big moan when she's challenged about, you know, you're good, but you're not that good. Lorraine having a full-on sexual awakening and deconstructing her boyfriend's shitty patriarchal values. Kid Cudi representing all that white male fragility hates in America. The facing off of MaXXXine and Pearl, and like I've already talked about, you know, the mirroring of those characters, but not only in violence, but even when they're just like drinking lemonade at the table. All the tension between them is palpable, even though you never really quite see the two of them together in that scene because they're both played by Mia Goth. The fact that the gore was actually shocking too, like my theater gasped both times that Jenna Ortega was shot. In MaXXXine, there were a few moments that did it for me. Like I've never seen anyone get their neck slit from the back. That was some freak shit. The dead bodies were gross and upsetting to look at. Oh, and how could I forget the ball crushing scene? Yes, that was gross. But it was also a scene that it felt confusing to me. I couldn't really get a grasp of where MaXXXine was at, and again, this could be intentional, but it was giving me a hard time reading the film. It just felt to me that the movie couldn't really get a grasp on what version of MaXXXine they wanted to present in terms of her character development up to this point. It didn't really seem like they could pick a lane, and like obviously she wouldn't want to implicate herself with what happened in Texas, so it makes a little bit of sense to me why she wouldn't talk to the police. But then when she's going through this same thing again, like her friends are dying, I don't understand why there's such a lack of a take charge attitude. And then that third act, when she's finally going to the place to confront her past and confront everything that's standing in her way of becoming a star, it feels so anticlimactic what she goes through. A gun is gingerly taken out of her hands by her father, and like, yes, she was shocked, but just given everything she's been through, like that was a weird moment to me. She gets knocked out, tied up, then the police show up and do all the heavy lifting to get her dad on the ground, and all she has to do is pick up a gun and shoot him. Her becoming a star because of her dad and because of being involved in multiple homicides is so antithetical to the wow factor of her character. If the idea really is that she will not accept a life that she doesn't deserve and she's a star, then why is the end of her story centered around sensationalism? It wasn't about her overcoming the adversity of the industry, which they had built up so much in the movie. In fact, it was the opposite. She got a cheat code. She was involved in a horrific news story and then became a star that way. I think it would have been a more effective story if she really did handle shit on her own, especially without her goofy agent. Giancarlo, I love you. I mean, like, it was a good performance. I liked the character, but I wanted to see MaXXXine handling things on her own, like the character that I thought she'd been built up to be. Why didn't she infiltrate her father's crazy rituals and take him down on her own? Her father's just lying there defenseless by the end when she takes him out. That's not a story of a star. That's just an opportunist. And is that the whole point? Is that the whole point of Hollywood? Is that just how it works? Maybe that was the point, and, you know, it just right over my head. Maybe that's why she didn't have anything of value to say to that reporter, you know? I've been talking for an hour. I don't know how much of this I'm gonna cut out, but I think it's time to wrap it up. I gave MaXXXine 3 stars. It's a serviceable theater film. Sorry I didn't warn you about spoilers in the beginning. I should have done that. My bad. But anyway, yeah, what were your thoughts on MaXXXine? Don't be shy. Let me know in the comments down below. Let me know maybe your ranking of the trilogy. For me, it goes X, Pearl, MaXXXine. If you'd like to see even more reviews from me, then my review of Longlegs is coming out next Monday. I also have lots of solo reviews. I've got solo deep dives. I've got director deep dives. I've got franchise deep dives. The lot of it. I've got, you know, there's fun for the whole family on this channel. I also have my second channel where I post my travel vlogs and where I talk a lot about physical media. I also have a Patreon where you get a bonus video every single week. All my social media and everything that you need is listed down below, but more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye. Now say it with me. I will not accept a life I do not deserve. Crushed it.